to the point where like I was afraid of my dad.
It started just how you just described. It started with, I think it started with one student that was just vulnerable when they were doing an altar call and sharing things that you're dealing with, and just started repenting. Well, welcome to the Kingdom Awakening podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Simons. I have with me Avery Boone. Avery, welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Avery, I was talking to your mom and to your grandma,
Yeah.
and they both had really cool stories that were really your story from a retreat or something like that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what was this retreat?
So this was in my junior year, so this past summer, and each year all the grade levels take different retreats or trips at the end of the year, kind of like a send-off into summer, but like a one last hoorah type deal. So each grade level goes on them, and so 9th through 12th graders. The 12th grade one is more like you go on a beach trip and then you graduate, and so it's like, bye. And then the other ones are more focused on like different things as a whole. So freshmen, it's kind of like bonding, and then sophomore year it's about unity, and then junior year it's about leadership. And so they took us to legit the middle of nowhere, Tennessee. It was like 9-hour bus ride and no service. We rolled in and it was like cabins, and there was scorpions in our room, and like all the good stuff. But while we were there, they really honed in on like how to step up, and basically like you're going to be seniors and everyone's going to be looking at you. And so each morning and night we had like a little sermon from our teachers who were our chaperones on the trip. And then one of the nights we were in our small group, and our teachers basically said like, we're going to have a student-led night, kind of to let y'all get up there and just talk about really whatever you want. It's really up to y'all how it goes, how long it takes, what you want to talk about. And I'm sitting in my small group, and it was just about like 7 girls, like my really close friend group. And one of my friends, her mom was a chaperone on the trip. And so she was like, if any of y'all are interested. And I just kind of got this like little gut feeling, and I was like, oh, I'll do it. And I was like, had my hand up, and I was like, oh my gosh, okay, so I guess I'll do this. And so I went back to my room, and I realized I was like, I have no idea what I'm going to talk about. I have no resources whatsoever besides my Bible and devotional book that I brought because I had 0 service. And I just kind of asked my teacher, and I was like, well, what exactly do I need to be talking about? And she was like, if you could just focus on leadership and you can be vulnerable, you don't have to tell anything about your personal life. Like, it's really just up to you how it goes. And the years prior to this, the student-led night hadn't really gone to the expectation, and it was kind of just like a more awkward thing. And it was like all the kids sitting in a circle and just kind of saying like, here's something I struggle with. And everyone just was like looking at each other like, well, I can't really give you advice on that. And so they were kind of hesitant to let us do it. And before we went on the trip, our grade had lower expectations. My grade is a lot of like younger siblings to older kids. And so there had been kind of like this negative tone set on our grade almost. And like, those are the kids that are going to get rowdy with the substitute teacher and probably be in D hall and all the different things. And I think I heard the words like, we are beyond impressed like 10, 20 times after this whole night happened. But basically, I was one of the student speakers for our little student-led night, and I was with about, I want to say 4 or 5 other of my really close friends who were all boys, so I was the only girl to get up there and do it. And we kind of started off where each of us had like our own little individual sermon type deal, and so I talked about the insecurities in leadership and how no one really has to be fit to be a leader. And it's really hard to be held back and let your anxiety and fear say like you aren't good enough to step up and be a leader, or you aren't qualified, because truly no one is qualified if you really think about it, especially in high school whenever you're constantly going through different struggles and stuff. And so I got up there and I talked about, I have my notes from my talk pulled up actually on my phone, but I had played volleyball up until I think 7th grade to my junior year. And I was very much like the B team athlete. Like, my brothers are extremely athletic. And so I was really just kind of like trying to make myself busy. And so I decided to play volleyball, and that was about it. And I was always on JV, but I kind of just like stepped up and I said, I don't think my skill level really matters here. I more want to like be a leader in any way I can. And junior year, you're an upperclassman. And so I had a bunch of the younger girls on our JV varsity team looking up to me, but also all the younger girls in our volleyball program and even some of the older girls. Like I was constantly just like in a leadership position. And so that was one of my examples that I talked about, just how you don't have to necessarily be older or more experienced to still be a leader. And I talked about in the classroom how I I've dabbled in some honors classes and AP classes and all the things, but I've never been like the smartest kid or the kid that's going to make straight A's on everything. Like I am most definitely okay with like an 85 and I'm not going to cram the night before, those types of things. And just how you don't really have to be like better than someone to be able to give them advice and help them out through things. And so I talked about that, and um, I talked a little bit about my experiences with like my siblings. I have 5 younger brothers. I mean, I have 5 younger brothers. Technically, I have 6 if you count one of them, but my family dynamic is very different than most, especially most kids that I go to school with, because I feel like Little Rock Christian and really just like smaller Christian private schools are kind of put like there's this little bubble around them, like they don't go through hard things and they have no problems because they go to private school and they have all grown up in these good Christian homes. And while partially, yes, that's true, like I just kind of opened up to my classmates and I was like, I just want you to know that like I don't have everything figured out and I go through all these different things quite regularly. And I go
You're
home.
you're in front of how? Okay, so how many people are you speaking to right now?
There was probably like 70 kids in there and then about 7 or 8 of my teachers.
Okay, and did they have any idea what you were going to speak on?
No, not really. They
Okay.
basically, we got up there and they were just like, we're going to speak on leadership. And I really didn't start talking about my family life and those kinds of struggles until we basically gave our little sermons, and then they were probably like 5 to 10 minutes long each. And then we got up there, all 5 of us, and we basically said, we're going to open up the floor and we just want to talk about different struggles and things that we have and just kind of be open with each other. And so we all just kind of individually started bouncing off. And a couple of my friends that were up there. So it was basically like us on a stage, and then we're looking out and we were sitting on the stage kind of to make it more like comfortable, I guess. And so one of my friends was talking about struggles in sports, and another one was talking about losing his dad. And then another one of my friends talked about like divorce. And then I got up there and I talked about my dad struggling with alcohol and how that had kind of like taken over my family. And at this point, when like in that journey, I my family was very like offset by my dad's problems with alcohol, and it was really hard for me to go over and have a relationship with him. And I talked about kind of why that came to be and how I kind of got scared and I was kind of like shaky at first. And I was like, I don't know why, but I feel comfortable enough to sit here and say this to everyone. I just felt no judgment. And all of my friends were in the front row. So I'm just kind of like looking at them. And then I kind of just started to ease into it. And I was like, okay, like everything's going to be fine. I'm just going to be open and whatever. And I started talking about how a couple months prior to our trip, I had gotten a phone call in the middle of the night from my younger brother, who me and my brother are 13 months apart. So he's 16. And he's 16, but he doesn't necessarily act like a 16-year-old. He's more like he doesn't give the like when I was 16, we're not on the same wavelength there. But so he calls me and I'm thinking like he's asking me to pick him up from a friend's house, or hey, will you go into my room and go get my Xbox or something? And I was over here at my mom's house and my dad lives 10 minutes on the street. And he called me and he was running down the road and he was like, I need you to come get me. I need you to leave. Dad is flipping out. And I knew immediately that something was really wrong because I was the only one who had ever really, it's really, so when me and my dad, I have me, my brother Dalton, and my brother Sawyer, we're full brothers. So we're my mom and my dad's. And then, so it was just Dalton and Sawyer at my dad's house. And then Walker, who's 3, is my mom's. He lives over here. But he was like, Sawyer's still at home. Dad, it's really scary, and I really need you to come get me. And so I just had this really this sense of fear kind of come over me, and I was just like, I don't know what to do. And my first instinct was grab my keys and get in the car and go. And I realized I need to tell my mom and my stepdad before I leave where I'm going. And my stepdad is in the DEA, and so he's very much I have this protective, in control, type A, those kinds of things. And he was like, you're gonna stay here and I'm gonna go get Dalton. And so he went over there and picked Dalton up, and my other brother was asleep. And so that was the first time that I am kind of more I can experience things and I don't have to tell anyone about it, because I forgive sometimes too easily. And so I would go back over to my dad's house and I would just kind of be more aware of what was going on, but I wouldn't necessarily let that affect my brothers. And I never wanted my opinions of my dad to be put onto my brothers because of their relationship with him. And so
what he had been experiencing was something that you had experienced.
yes, a couple
before. Okay.
or I guess a year prior to this was the first time that I really experienced my dad being very just blatantly drunk, and to the point where I was afraid of my dad. And I think for a while I was too young to realize exactly what was happening, and it never really I never had a reason to fear him, because he would start drinking once we were asleep, and he would do different things. He would wake us up in the middle of the night, and he would stay up till 4 a.m. and be asleep till 12 the next day. And there was always just this sense of darkness at my dad's house. And I used to tell my mom that I want to be at your house on the weekends, because it's just even though we're doing the same thing that we're doing at my dad's house over here, it just feels brighter and more alive over here. And I could be laying on the couch at dad's house and just feel this almost darkness. I don't really know how to put it, but it was right after Thanksgiving break. This was my sophomore year, and my dad had kind of had an episode, I guess, and threw things, and it was just kind of and my cousin was over from out of town and yelling. My grandma lives with us over there too. And so just saying things to my grandma, saying things to me, telling my brothers things why don't you go hang out with your real parents, and talking about my mom and my stepdad. And I was just this is not my dad. And I know why you're acting like this. And it's because you have an alcohol problem. And that was sophomore year. And that was the first time my parents really had to have a sit down conversation and say, this is not okay. And if you want the kids to be in your life, you're going to have to change some things. And so he kind of stopped for a little bit, and then it kind of picked up to where he would just drink whenever we weren't there, and then that turned into just drinking whenever we were asleep. And then it just picked right back up, because that's what happens to people who are addicted to that stuff.
So your brother, he calls you.
He calls me.
Your
So
stepdad goes over.
He goes over and he picks him up and he brings him back, and I was just kind of Dalton just experienced what I had. And it's really scary to step up and say, I'm actually going to remove myself from the situation, and having to pick sides. I feel that's not something that a lot of people experience. Oh, I'm a mama's girl or a mama's boy or whatever. But truly having to say, I'm picking mom right now. I'm picking, I'm leaving here because you are not what I want to be around. And I never wanted my brothers to have to face that. But when he called me that night, he did. And so my younger brother, Sawyer, stayed, and that time it was more minimal, but so it was kind of just looked over, not necessarily looked over, but my parents were just this can't be happening, why is this happening again? And so my dad quickly stopped drinking when we were over there, and then the cycle continued. And then about a month or two later, I kind of was okay, I'm gonna go back over there, I'm just gonna give it a try. There's no reason why my dad can't have a second or third, or at this time it was more a fourth or fifth chance. And so I went over there, and my dad and my brother Dalton, they really butt heads, and my brother is kind of an antagonizer. And so as soon as he sees something that's like getting on my dad's nerves or making him tick a certain way, like he'll tap into that and he'll be like, oh, so you are mad, so I have pushed your buttons, and he'll just start going and going and going. And my dad was drinking, and that was the first time I ever saw my dad put his hands on my brother. And I immediately was just like, what do I do here? How am I going to step in and not like not put myself at risk? But then that immediately turned into, how do I help my brother right now? And I could have cared less what happened to me. And so I ran into the room, and our rooms are all just like right next to each other. And I mean, the walls are paper thin and you hear everything. So I walked in and I was like, get off of him. We're not doing this right now. Go to bed, get out of each other's rooms, go to bed. And I just remember sitting in my bed that night thinking like, this could get a lot worse. And so I told my mom, and I was like, I don't know what to do. I can't go over there anymore. And my brothers kept saying like, I don't care. Like, I'll go back over there. He's not going to do anything to me, blah, blah, blah. And that's what I talked about on my trip. And just how like forgiveness is something, because that was kind of the point of like why we were up there speaking, was to say like everyone goes through hard things, and there's no reason why there should be kids in this crowd, and even some of us on stage, that like we have these problems with, that we can't make like the best of our senior year together. And so I was showing an example of like forgiveness and what that did to my family and what that did to me. And later on, my dad ended up, there was a lot worse situations that came out of my dad's alcoholism, and he ended up having to go to rehab in July, and he has been sober ever since. So it was just really like, I don't know, because my junior trip was kind of like the climax of the situation, and then I guess the summer was the climax, but like I didn't know that it would get worse. I thought it was at my worst. And I think because I got up there and I talked about it and I made sense of it, and I said like, okay, I'm allowed to have struggles, and there's other people that are struggling right beside me. And it kind of opened up the floor during that little talk that I was giving. And my teachers were crying and people were crying, and I was like, I'm not saying this to make y'all emotional. I'm just giving an example of how like everyone can go through hard things and you can have no idea about it. Like, I'm up here and I can guarantee you that no one knew that was happening in my life besides the people that are sitting in the front row who I've called and cried to and all the different things. But that doesn't mean that I'm any less capable of being a leader or giving wisdom to anyone, or that I can't overcome hard things just because those are the struggles that I have in my life.
So the first person that spoke was talking about struggles with sports. Then it was somebody that had a loss in the family. Is that right?
Yes.
And there's another one.
He was talking about divorce and how his
Divorce,
parents had separated. And when my friend was talking about loss, his dad died of an overdose when we were in 7th grade. And so it just kind of set the tone. And I was like, and the boys kind of were not giving like as much detail, but it's hard for me when I don't have something to read off of and go like script for script, like to not give details and not to give context. And so I just got really deep really fast, and we kind of just sat there and we were like, if anyone else wants to come up here and talk about anything they struggle with, and it doesn't have to be an alcoholic parent or anyone like an addiction based thing or anything, it can just be any struggle that you have, because there really is
I want to pause you on just because I noticed something in it. So there's something that you actually identified in the way that you shared. You didn't just give permission to share, for somebody to share something that's somehow like more difficult, because when a lot of times when people come forward with personal difficulties or things that they've gone through, it can almost become this competition of who has the worst story. Yeah. But the way that you addressed it wasn't from the perspective of, let me tell you how bad my story was.
Yeah.
It was, this is what I've gone through. And there's forgiveness that's available. So there was a redemptive element in how you share. Now, I don't know if you know this, but have you heard of the revival that happened at Asbury College last year? Do you know how it started?
I don't.
It started just how you just described. It started with, I think it started with one student that was just vulnerable when they were doing an altar call and sharing things that you're dealing with, and just started repenting. for
Yeah.
things that was going on,
Mhm.
and next thing you know, another and another,
Yeah.
and all. So that there's a connection, or at least a correlation between what what you experienced and what happened
Mhm.
at Asbury, and
Yeah.
it really goes to this place of authenticity.
Mhm.
The only setting that I've personally been in where I was sure a revival was going to break out was where we were in a charismatic church and we all were practicing the gifts. You know, we're all, and everybody's praying for revival, revival, revival.
Yeah.
There's one guy in our men's group, and we were all, this is 20 years ago,
Mhm.
but there was one guy who had never spoken in tongues. He had never prayed for prophecy, never prayed for healing, never seen the gifts, none of
Yeah.
those things. And he gets on the microphone to pray, and it was just the most authentic
Mhm.
thing that he could say. He said, God, I just want you. Like, I
Yeah.
don't care what it looks like. I just want you. And there's something about being authentic and letting kind of all of those veils that we put in front of ourselves down, and just
Yeah.
saying, this is who I am and this is what I've
Mhm.
gone through,
Yeah.
that it seems to be very attractive to the heart of the Lord. And
Mhm.
it gives other people permission
Yes.
to kind of remove those veils. So you share your story. So then what happened?
So, we kind of had the point where everyone on stage, the 5 of us, were just kinda like, "We aren't telling you these things to make you upset or to think that you're better off than anyone else or to make you feel worse about your struggles if you deal with things that are worse than this. We're just trying to," basically what you say, "be open and vulnerable with you and just say that, like, we all struggle and we all wanna be, like, just open with each other, and we wanna step into this year knowing that no one is perfect." And so we just kind of gave, like, an open, informal invite, and we were like, "If you wanna get up here and share parts of your story, feel free to." And so I was expecting to sit there and it just be kinda like the awkward silence for at least a couple minutes, and instantly, one of my classmates got up there and started talking about his struggles and how he wanted to join the military and just was so vulnerable. And then other people, and I think one of the things was that you could tell that everyone was so comfortable with each other. And these are people that, like, they would never sit at the same lunch table at school or never talk to each other in class. And they're getting up and they're side by side hugging each other and saying, like, "I'm so grateful for you. And I'm so grateful that I get to share this part of life with you." And I think I got the most, like, so we were kind of, I want to say there was probably like 10 or 15 of us up there, and then my close friends started going up there. And I just immediately, like, the amount of emotions I felt because I knew the struggles that they had, and I knew how those struggles impacted their lives and how they had taken a toll on them and the different things they were battling, and how I was told that, and, like, a confidence, and how they were not necessarily embarrassed of the things they were going through, but it was just, like, hard for them to talk about it in front of people, and to watch some of my very best friends get up there in front of 70 plus people and say, "Here's what I struggle with," and just to tell it all. Like, it's hard for me to talk about because I don't even know how to, like, put it into words what exactly happened, but it started with, like, the girls coming up, and then some of my really close guy friends started coming up who I've grown up with and I look at as brothers, and I got so emotional, and at the end, we were kinda given, like, a designated hour that we had to be in there, and then the rest of the night was free time. And there was, like, 2 or 3 hours of just free time, and we spent it all just in this little, like, auditorium just in worship. And one of my really good friends was playing the guitar and the other one was singing, and everyone just had arms in the air. We were all praying over each other and just kinda, like, popcorning out prayers. And at the end of the, like, speaking part, I think that, like, 80% of everybody got up there and shared, and so there was probably, like, 10 or 15 people at the end who were still sitting there, and no one looked at anyone differently. No one looked at anyone and said, "You got up there and shared, and that was just too much for me," or "You didn't share, and that looks bad on you." Like, we all just kind of came together at the end and we all started praying and worshiping. And that went on for like 2.5 hours. And we were just in there. And there's this one picture, and it's one of my teachers took it in the back. And we're all up at the front, and everybody's arms are raised. We're all close together. And my friend on the guitar, my friend singing, their arms are just raised. And we're all just standing there, just like in awe of what's happening, because our grade, and honestly, are just like groups of people, we haven't experienced anything like that. And I remember looking at everyone once we had kind of stopped the worship, and them just being like, I don't want this to end, and I don't want to go home and this just be like a moment at junior trip. And I genuinely saw that whole night change people and change their relationships with the Lord. And I think it made it more comfortable because we're all in these Bible classes together and we all are open about our faith, but to a certain extent. And so the fact that like we all got up there, and I think judgment is just a constant insecurity in teenagers' lives, obviously. And so the fact that there was like over half of our grade there, and we were all just standing together, and not one time did anyone think, I don't want to raise my hands because someone's going to think bad about me, or I don't want to get on my knees and pray right now because someone's going to think I'm weird, and I don't want to cry or share anything because I don't want to be looked at as weak. And just all the insecurities were gone in that moment. And everyone, it was like truly like life-changing experience for not just me, but my classmates as well.
That's awesome. I so I've seen things happen in the opposite direction and the way that you described. And when I say the opposite is where one person with the wrong motive gets the microphone and starts, saying something of, I want to look a certain way, or I want to be perceived as certain, and all of a sudden it changes the atmosphere in the room. And now all of the freedom that people were feeling before, where it shuts down. So I've seen that happen where one person, maybe they're well intentioned, or maybe that, whatever, that they're not trying to be authentic, and they're, where it can actually stop what the Lord was wanting to do. But here you have the example of one moment of authenticity, and it opens up for everybody to experience that same kind of freedom. So, and then, okay, so you had a 1 hour slot. What are some of the other, I'm just curious, what are some of the other stories that people were sharing? Was it?
There was a lot of stuff about anxiety, and a lot of girls shared about just how it was a lot. It would take one person to kind of get up there and like open up a new like struggle, and then a couple more would come up and be like, I actually struggle with the same exact thing, and you're not alone in that. And so different things like anxiety and depression, and different things with parents, and pressure in school and pressure in sports. And at our school especially, a lot of families foster and adopt. And one of my very best friends got up there and shared just how fostering and adoption just really opened his heart, and he struggled a long time with seeing like what the Lord was doing, because in some cases it's hard when everyone is technically the same, I guess, and everyone believes in Jesus and there's nothing really different or special about your faith, but then you have these experiences and you're like, God purposely did that in my life. And he was talking about how fostering and adopting was that eye-opening thing for him in his faith. And so there was things like that, and just how some of my friends would even get up there and just be like, I honestly don't know what I can talk about that I'm struggling with, but I do want to say that like I'm not perfect all the time, and I'm not 100% every day, but I couldn't be more thankful for the people up on the stage, and these people have shaped me into who I am. And so it was kind of just like whatever you wanted to talk about, you could get up there and say it. Truly, I think because we were all so unified in that moment, it shut every single door for the devil to get in there. There was not insecurity, there was no sadness. It was all just like repentance and joy. And I mean, everyone was bawling, crying, but none of it was out of sadness. It was all just look how good the Lord is, and look how he's moving so close to us right now in this moment.
So describe the atmosphere to me? Like, have you been in an environment like that before? Have you been in one since? What did it feel like?
Well, I have gone to a summer camp in Hot Springs before. It's called Brook Hill, and I grew up going there, and it almost felt, basically, I was a counselor there too, and so there's this end goal at the end of the week. Like, you kind of start off the week with building the connection with the campers, and the campers are anywhere from like second grade to 10th grade. And so there's a wide range, and they're all mixed into your activities. And so you are kind of, there's this job put on you, like, you build relationships and talk about Jesus. And on Thursday night, they do a reenactment of the crucifixion, and which is really hard for little kids to watch and for older kids to watch too, who have never really seen what exactly it meant for Jesus to die for us. And because you have a mixture of kids who have grown up going to this camp, and then a mixture of kids who are just the friend or trying something new and have really no idea what Brick Hill's all about. And so on Thursday nights, they do the reenactment, and one of the camp leaders gets up there and just kind of opens it up and says, if you want to repent, like, that is an option, and you don't have to be stuck with all of your guilt and insecurity and issues and sin. Like, this, what he just did when he died for you, that's why you don't have to be stuck with it all. And so in that moment, and I'd gone to camp for 4 or 5 years, and so that was probably the closest I'd ever felt, was when everyone would get up and just audibly pray and just repent. But this was just like close to that, like same idea, I guess. But I don't know if it was because I had never experienced anything like that with people I was so close to before, or just how we got there. It truly was like a one of a kind experience for me, and for a lot of people there too. And my teachers, and they just kept saying, like, this has never happened before at this trip. And this has never, like, yes, people have bonded and cried and got up there and shared different things, but never has it taken this kind of turn before. And so it started off, you could kind of tell that everyone was kind of nervous, but as the, like, speaker after next, like, the environment just got so comfortable, and it was almost like I could be sitting having a one-on-one conversation with you, but it was like you were having a one-on-one conversation, but you were talking to 70 people. And
Right.
just everyone, I keep saying this, there was just no fear in the situation. There was no doubt or insecurity or anxiety. Like, it was all just gone. And truly, like, when I left the trip, people kept saying to me, like, thank you for getting up there and being vulnerable, because that opened it up for me. And I was like, I hate taking the credit for that, because that wasn't me. That wasn't, I might have been like a door, or God worked through me, but that was all God. And God was the one who gave you the nudge to get up here and say, this is what I'm struggling with. And he was the one who put that on your heart and everything. And, like, I'm obviously here to help you through that, but I didn't want the responsibility of what happened that night, because it couldn't have happened without the Lord, genuinely.
Right. Right. Well, and I think that's always the case, right?
Yeah.
Is there, he chooses who he wants to initiate something.
Yeah.
But if it's us, great, and if it's somebody else, great. It's all the Lord. So, okay, so you mentioned that you've seen lasting change in your classmates since
Yeah.
this event. So, give me some examples of lasting change that you've noticed.
Well, a lot of me and my classmates and my close friends, we all go to the same youth group, and we grew up going to a different one right down the road. And I hate saying the word surface level, but I would say that it was kind of just like almost a social gathering, not necessarily church. And I mean, at our school, like, you're in 2 to 3 Bible classes at a time, and that like you're in Bible classes all day, you have chapel during the week, you go to church on Wednesday nights, you go to the Sunday service, and it's almost like a check off the box. Like, okay, well, I went here and I did that. After that trip, because I mean, checking the box that night was walking into the auditorium and sitting down and listening to everyone. But the extra step in the like genuineness of everything was when we stayed in there for 3 hours and when people were like in their Bibles on the way home and that night and constantly like when we left the auditorium, my birthday was actually the next day. So it's like 11:30 at this point, and my two of my teachers had driven like 45 minutes there, 45 minutes back to a Walmart to get a cake. And the boys' cabin like all came together and sang to my birthday, and it was a complete surprise. And so we sat outside and we ate this cake, and we all just kind of like we were up so late talking about that night. Just like what exactly happened and like the takeaways, and people who didn't necessarily want to get up there and share with everybody but wanted to share with our like closer circle. And then on the bus ride home and in our youth groups, because in chapel at school it's more of a like, again, you check your box off, like you go, you show up, you're not really listening, you're kind of checked out the whole time, like when's lunch, constantly like looking back at the clock. And I was kind of nervous. Yeah, when I was nervous because on the first day of school, the seniors, we had senior roll night that night. So a lot of us hadn't gone to bed until like 3 or 4. And then we got up for our senior sunrise at like 6:30. And then we had to do all the senior like first day of school things. And so chapel happened and I was like, oh gosh, like people are about to be so checked out and this is not gonna like we're gonna set the tone of this, and it's gonna take the seniors in the front doing something for everyone else to realize behind them, like, okay, like this is the chapel norm. And we stood up for worship and just all the seniors came to the front, and it wasn't like, okay, seniors, like you can kind of do what you want. It was just like personal choice. And I saw that, and I remember because there was like a 3-month gap between our junior trip and the first day of school. And I was just like, God's not done with our grade. And I watched that carry over to our youth groups on Wednesday nights, and just how like all of my friends and classmates show up for church on Sunday. And it's not just a task or something that they feel like they have to do. It's like something they want to do. Like my friends look forward to going to church and going to chapel, and we all bring our notebooks and Bibles into chapel, and we're actually like like engaging in the speakers. And just like I think the switch was before our trip, it was kind of like, here's, I'm doing this because I have to and I want to be like a good Christian kid and this would make people proud of me. And then that turned into, I want what I had at junior trip, and I want that relationship with the Lord. And I know that I have to take some initiative in that, and I'm willing to. And I've watched so many people take that initiative, and it's truly like changed who they are. It was just like one of my biggest blessings was watching the Lord like transform the people who I'm closest with during that trip.
That's cool. Avery, I just want to kind of give you the floor, which is a little bit of a scary thing, but too bad. You already told me a story of you doing it once. Will you just pray whatever's on your heart? It doesn't have to be related to this. It can be whatever you want.
Okay.
For anybody that watches or listens.
Okay. Dear Lord, I just pray that whoever's listening to this and whoever's not listening to this, that you would just put it on people's hearts to be able to be open to a relationship with you. And I feel like today there's this kind of uncomfortableness surrounding being a Christian and stepping out of the norm, especially with kids my age, but even in adults, and not agreeing with your coworkers and not agreeing with even your family members and friends, and just how difficult that can be for some people. And I just pray that you would be able to show people who struggle with that you are so near and you are so available, and all it takes is just the admission to say, hey, I want you and I need you. And I just pray that people would realize all over in schools and jobs and all over the world that you just would be there and be accessible to everyone who truly wants you. And I also pray for the people who do have you and do have that relationship with you, that they wouldn't be afraid to open that door to other people and to other people who might not see you as close to them and not see you as near to them. And I just pray that there would be a transformation in my generation and generations above me and generations below me, and that everyone would just seek you and long for that relationship with you, because I know that you are so capable of making yourself accessible to everyone. And it's in your name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Avery, thank you for joining us.
Very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. God bless you.